The sun was shining on the recreation ground at the south edge of the city as the citizens of St. Thomas and their guests gathered to commemorate Queen Victoria's 75th birthday. It was the 24th of May, 1894, and a full day's program had been planned. Various civic and military bands paraded in front of an estimated 8,000 spectators, celebrating the height of the British Empire. Among the guests were over 650 members of the Queen's Own Rifles from Toronto. A series of competitions among the members of this elite regiment were the highlight of the day's presentation. The activities were followed by a lunch and many toasts. The members of the visiting regiment would continue toasting throughout the day. Just before 8 p.m., several members of the regiment felt it was time for another parade, and they assembled for a march down Talbot Street. When the marchers reached the intersection of Talbot and Southwick Streets, several members of the throng became incensed that a local pharmacist, T.H. Duncombe, was flying 3 large American flags above his drugstore. The leaders of the mob poked their heads into the drugstore and demanded the man remove the offending flags. He refused, saying they were not his flags, but belonged to the upstairs tenant in the building. Frustrated by this answer, the most hot-headed members of the crowd climbed up and tore down the middle flag, against the advice of their colleagues and pleas from the assembled crowd. The arrival of a policeman prevented the removal of a second flag. The 16-foot flag was then dragged into the street and torn to ribbons. One account claims that the small scraps were then worn on the soldiers' chests as if they were medals. It is unclear when the culprits were sober enough to be informed of the flag's true owner. The upstairs tenant of Duncombe's pharmacy was the U.S. consulate. St. Thomas was home to a United States consular agency between 1866 and 1906. This diplomatic outpost served the many travelers arriving by train. It was similar to an embassy, and to desecrate its flag was serious business. Upon hearing of these events, Lieutenant Colonel R.B. Hamilton, senior officer with the Queen's Own Rifles, halted the special train returning the regiment to Toronto and rushed to the Grand Central Hotel in St. Thomas. This was the residence of the American consul, George J. Willis. Colonel Hamilton apologized for the regrettable incident, but bound by diplomatic protocol, Consul Willis refused the apology and referred the matter to the Secretary of State in Washington. It was now an international incident. Newspapers across the United States carried the story. Editorials were written. A Texas newspaper went so far as to believe this was grounds for invasion. Ottawa was soon involved and issued unconditional apologies for the outrage, promising that an inquiry would be held and those responsible would be dealt with appropriately. The inquiry began immediately, led by Colonel Hamilton. His inquiry confirmed what all eyewitnesses had reported, that those responsible were highly intoxicated. After repeated apologies and assurances that the culprits were extremely drunk at the time of the incident, the Americans relented and accepted the Canadian apology. One newspaper conceded that this was less the actions of John Bull and more the acts of John Barleycorn. To learn more about our local history or to see a schedule of our events, please visit elginhistoricalsociety.ca.